I never thought I'd be the guy writing one of these posts. I always read stories like this and thought, damn, that's rough, but you never really think it'll happen to you until it does. My wife, Emily, and I have been married for 8 years, together for 11. We met in college, that classic kind of love story where she was the outgoing, adventurous type, and I was the quiet, steady guy who kept her grounded. Or at least, that's what I thought. Looking back now, I don't know if she ever really needed me for anything besides stability. For the past year, things between us had been off. Nothing dramatic, no screaming matches, no slammed doors, just a slow, creeping distance. Emily had always been on her phone, but now she was constantly guarding it. She started working late more often, going on girls' nights that I was never invited to, and always seemed just a little too defensive whenever I asked about her schedule. I chalked it up to stress. She was in marketing, and her job had been ramping up lately. I figured she was just exhausted, maybe feeling unappreciated, and I did my best to pick up the slack at home, hoping things would smooth over. Then came our anniversary. Our 8th goddamn wedding anniversary. I wanted to make it special. I booked a weekend at this beautiful boutique hotel in the city. Nothing too crazy, but a romantic getaway, just the two of us. When I told Emily about it, she hesitated. Not outright, but that slight, almost imperceptible pause before she forced a smile and said, "Oh, babe, that's so sweet. But I have a big campaign launch that weekend. Can we reschedule?" That was the moment I felt it in my gut. The undeniable something is wrong feeling. But I pushed it down. I told myself I was being paranoid, that she was just busy, that life gets in the way sometimes. So I let it go. I told her we could celebrate the next weekend. She seemed relieved. Not apologetic, not disappointed, relieved. A few days later, one of my coworkers, Mark, told me he had seen Emily at a downtown bar the previous weekend. She was with some guy, he said, looking uncomfortable. I wasn't going to say anything, but it didn't look like a work meeting, man. I laughed it off, told him it was probably just one of her clients. But inside, my stomach was twisting into knots. Still, I did nothing. I had no proof, just suspicions. And I wasn't going to be that guy, the paranoid husband who accuses his wife without evidence. Then, a few weeks later, my proof landed right in my lap. I was cleaning up our bedroom, something Emily rarely bothered to do anymore, and I found a hotel receipt in her nightstand. Not just any hotel, the hotel. The same goddamn one I had booked for our anniversary weekend. The one she said she was too busy to go to. The date on the receipt? The exact weekend I had planned for us. The kicker? It wasn't even just a dinner or spa charge. No, it was for a 2-night stay. I sat on the bed, staring at that slip of paper, my hands shaking. My mind was racing. This had to be a mistake, right? Maybe she went there for work. Maybe she just, what? Slept there alone while I was sitting at home like a chump, watching Netflix and waiting for her to get back from her campaign launch. No fucking way. I knew I had to get confirmation before I lost my mind. I called the hotel. At first, the front desk lady was polite but firm. "I'm sorry, sir, but we can't give out guest information." But I wasn't letting this go. I played dumb. Told her I had been charged for a stay I never booked and needed details for billing purposes. And guess what? She bought it. "Oh, yes, I see the reservation," she said, clicking away on her keyboard. It was booked under Emily, last name. Stayed 2 nights in the honeymoon suite. The honeymoon suite. The fucking honeymoon suite. And was it just her? I asked, my voice so steady it scared me. A pause. Then, hesitant. No. She had a guest listed. A Mr. Daniel Carter. I had no idea who the fuck Daniel Carter was. But at that moment, I knew exactly who he was. I sat there, gripping my phone so tightly that my knuckles turned white, my heart pounding in my ears. The name Daniel Carter was seared into my brain like a brand. I repeated it under my breath, as if saying it enough times would make it make sense, but there was no way to make sense of this. Emily had lied to me. She had lied straight to my face, without hesitation, without even a shred of guilt in her voice. She had taken another man to the very hotel I had chosen for our anniversary, to the honeymoon suite no less, while I sat at home believing she was knee-deep in work. I felt sick. My stomach churned, my head spun, and for a moment, I thought I might actually throw up right there in our bedroom, surrounded by the life we had built together, the life she had so effortlessly disrespected. I knew I couldn't sit on this. I couldn't let it fester in my head like some slow-burning poison, eroding every last shred of my sanity. I had to confront her, and I had to do it now. I wasn't going to wait for the perfect moment, wasn't going to give her a chance to come up with some convoluted excuse. I wanted to see her face the second she realized she was caught. I grabbed the receipt, stuffed it into my pocket, and waited. I didn't text, didn't call. I just sat there, staring at the door, my pulse thrumming under my skin like a war drum, waiting for her to come home and face what she had done. When Emily walked through the door that evening, she was on the phone, laughing. I don't know if it was with him, or a friend, or maybe even her mother, but the sound of her voice set my blood on fire. It was the laugh she used when she was trying to charm someone, the one that had always made me feel lucky to be the man she chose. Now, it made me want to rip the entire foundation of our marriage apart. She saw me sitting there, noticed my expression, and immediately her smile faltered. "Hey," she said, hanging up quickly, her eyes flickering with something confusion. Concern? Guilt? What's wrong? I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch, let the weight of it sink in. Then, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the receipt, tossing it onto the coffee table between us. "You tell me," I said, my voice disturbingly calm. She glanced down, her eyes scanning the paper, and for a split second, I saw something flash across her face, panic. But she was quick, too quick, smoothing out her expression like she had rehearsed for this moment 1,000 times before. "Where did you get this?" she asked, her voice carefully measured, as if the receipt itself was the problem and not what it represented. I leaned forward, my elbows resting on my knees, keeping my gaze locked onto her like a predator waiting for its prey to make a move. "I called the hotel," I said flatly. "I know you stayed there. I know you weren't alone." I watched her closely, waiting for her reaction, waiting for the moment she realized there was no way out of this. For a second, just a second, she looked trapped, like a deer caught in headlights. But then, like flipping a switch, she composed herself. She rolled her eyes, actually rolled them, and scoffed. "Oh my God, you're being ridiculous," she said, crossing her arms over her chest. "It's not what you think." I felt my jaw tighten, my teeth grinding together as I forced myself to stay calm. "Then why don't you tell me what it is, Emily? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you spent our anniversary weekend in a honeymoon suite with some guy named Daniel Carter. So go ahead. Explain it to me." She hesitated. I could see the gears turning in her head, scrambling for an excuse, something that would make this go away. And then, she sighed dramatically, like she was the one who had to deal with me being unreasonable. "Okay, fine. I was there," she admitted, lifting her chin slightly like she was doing me a favor by telling the truth. "But it wasn't what you think. Daniel is a friend. We had a last-minute work event in the city, and all the hotels were booked. I didn't want to drive home late, so we just shared a room." I laughed. I actually laughed, because the audacity of it all was astounding. "A friend? A work event? Do you hear yourself right now?" I leaned back, running a hand down my face, trying to contain the fury building inside me. "Emily, you booked the honeymoon suite. Not just a room. The honeymoon suite." Her lips pressed together, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something real, nervousness. I didn't choose the room," she stammered. "That was the only one available, I swear." It's not like it meant anything. I stared at her, and all I could think about was how easily the lies fell from her lips. How effortless it was for her to stand there and insult my intelligence, expecting me to believe that she accidentally ended up in the most romantic suite a hotel had to offer with another man. "You really expect me to believe that?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. She sighed again, exasperated now, as if I was the unreasonable one. "You're blowing this way out of proportion," she snapped. "Nothing happened, okay? You're just being paranoid and insecure. I can't believe you don't trust me. That did it. That really did it." The way she twisted it around, making herself the victim, making it seem like I was some jealous, controlling husband instead of a man who had just found out his wife had been lying to him for God knows how long. I stood up, towering over her now, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "You're unbelievable," I muttered, shaking my head. "You lied to me. You looked me in the eyes and lied. And now you're gaslighting me like I'm the crazy one?" She threw her hands up. "What do you want me to say?" she shot back. "That I'm sorry for staying in a hotel? That I'm sorry you're reading too much into this? Jesus, I didn't do anything." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay in control. "You know what, Emily? I don't even care about what you say anymore. Because I know the truth. And I'm done playing this game with you." I turned and started walking away, because if I stayed in that room 1 second longer, I might have said things I could never take back. Where are you going? She demanded, her voice sharp, laced with irritation instead of remorse. I didn't even turn around when I answered. Anywhere but here. I drove around aimlessly for hours that night, the city lights blurring past me as my mind replayed every single moment of that conversation, every excuse, every lie, every pathetic attempt Emily made to twist the blame onto me. The rage in my chest was suffocating, but beneath it, beneath the fire and fury, was something much worse, a deep, gnawing sadness that I couldn't shake. I wanted to be angry, I wanted to scream, but more than anything, I wanted to understand why. Why had she done this? Was I not enough? Had she ever loved me at all, or had I just been convenient, a safe bet she could keep in her back pocket while she entertained other options? I pulled into an empty parking lot, gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers ached, trying to process the fact that the woman I had spent the last 11 years with, the woman I built a life with, had betrayed me in such a cold, calculated way. It wasn't just the cheating, it was the ease with which she lied, the way she acted as if I was the crazy one for confronting her. That was what hurt the most. Eventually, exhaustion won out over anger, and I drove back home, dreading whatever was waiting for me inside. When I walked through the door, Emily was sitting on the couch, arms crossed, looking annoyed rather than remorseful. She didn't jump up to apologize, didn't look guilty, just irritated, as if I had ruined her night. I stood there for a moment, taking her in, feeling the weight of our years together pressing down on me like an unbearable force. This was the woman I had thought I would grow old with, the woman I had defended to my friends when they told me she could be selfish, the woman I had fought for, even when things got hard. And now, as I looked at her, all I saw was a stranger, someone who wasn't even trying to fight for me. You just took off, she said, her voice clipped, like she was scolding a child. That was mature. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. Are you serious right now? That's what you're mad about? Not the fact that you got caught lying, not the fact that you spent our anniversary weekend with another man, but the fact that I left instead of standing here and letting you insult my intelligence. I was so drained, so sick of the back and forth, of the manipulations, of the constant gaslighting. Emily sighed dramatically, rolling her eyes as she leaned back into the couch like this entire conversation was exhausting for her. I already told you, she huffed. Nothing happened. But you clearly don't believe me, so what's the point of even talking about it? I stared at her, feeling the last of my patience snap. The point, Emily, is that I don't trust you anymore. And trust? That's everything. Once that's gone, what's left? The words hung between us like a death sentence, because we both knew the answer. She scoffed, shaking her head. Oh my God, you're being so dramatic. You're acting like I had some big affair. You did. I cut her off, my voice sharp, my eyes locked onto hers. You did. You lied to me. You made plans with another man while I was making plans for us. You chose him over me, over our marriage. That's an affair, Emily. For the first time, something shifted in her expression. She didn't deny it this time, didn't try to spin another lie. Instead, she just crossed her arms tighter over her chest, lips pressed into a thin line, like she was weighing her options. And then, with a shrug, she said the words that would shatter whatever tiny, fragile piece of me still wanted to believe in us. Fine, she said, her voice flat, devoid of any emotion. Yeah, I was with Daniel. Is that what you want to hear? I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. Even though I had known, even though I had already figured it out, hearing her say it out loud, hearing her admit it with so little remorse, still managed to feel like a knife to the gut. Wow, I breathed, running a hand over my face, trying to process the sheer casualness of her confession. Just like that? No apology? No regret? Nothing? She shrugged again, like this was some minor inconvenience and not the destruction of our entire marriage. What do you want me to say? She shot back. That I'm sorry? That I regret it? Because honestly, I don't. Things between us haven't been good for a while, and I needed something different. I blinked at her, stunned into silence. She needed something different. That was all it took. Years of love, of commitment, of loyalty, reduced to a craving for something different. I felt like a complete idiot. While I had been racking my brain trying to figure out how to fix things, how to bring us back to what we once were, she had already checked out. She had already moved on without even giving me a chance. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't losing my wife that night. I had already lost her a long time ago. I had just been too blind to see it. I took a deep breath, my heart hammering against my ribs, and looked at her one last time, really looked at her. And I realized something that should have been obvious from the moment I walked in that door. She didn't love me anymore. Maybe she hadn't for a long time. Maybe she never truly did. And that was the hardest pill to swallow. I nodded slowly, the decision settling into my bones like cold steel. Okay, I said, my voice eerily calm. Then we're done. Emily didn't argue, didn't protest, didn't even try to stop me. She just stared at me, expression unreadable, and after a long moment, simply said, I guess we are. And just like that, 11 years of my life were reduced to a single, indifferent shrug. The house felt different the moment I walked away from her. It wasn't a home anymore, just four walls filled with broken promises and unspoken betrayals. I didn't slam the door, didn't yell, didn't throw things like I had seen in movies when a man discovers his wife has been unfaithful. Instead, I moved with the quiet weight of finality, walking into our bedroom, the same one we had once shared as husband and wife, the same one where I had stayed up late waiting for her to come home, where I had foolishly believed she was exhausted from work when in reality, she was giving herself to another man. My hands trembled as I grabbed a duffel bag from the closet, yanking open drawers and shoving in whatever clothes I could find. There was no plan in my head, no real sense of direction, just the overwhelming need to get out, to breathe, to escape the suffocating walls of our marriage that had crumbled the moment she uttered that soulless confession. Emily didn't follow me. She didn't rush into the room, begging me to stay, didn't collapse into tears, begging for another chance. She just let me go, as if my presence in her life had been nothing more than a temporary convenience, easily discarded when it no longer suited her. And that realization cut deeper than any words ever could. I had spent years thinking we were building something real, something lasting, only to find out that I was the only one who had ever truly believed in it. I zipped up the bag, my chest tightening with every breath, and as I glanced around the room one last time, my eyes landed on the framed wedding photo sitting on the nightstand. In the picture, she was laughing, leaning into me, her hand resting against my chest in a way that had once made me feel like the luckiest man in the world. Now, it just looked like a cruel joke, like a version of her that had never truly existed. Without thinking, I grabbed the frame, staring down at the memory trapped behind glass, and then, in one swift motion, I hurled it against the wall. The sound of shattering glass filled the air, the crack of it slicing through the silence like a gunshot, and I stood there for a long moment, staring at the broken pieces scattered across the floor, wondering how I had ever let myself believe that this woman would be my forever. When I finally left, I didn't look back. I climbed into my car, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, and I just drove. I didn't have a destination in mind, just the need to put as much distance between myself and that house as possible. The city lights blurred together as I sped down the highway, my mind a chaotic storm of anger, pain, and betrayal. Every memory of her, every lie she had told, every night she had come home late with flimsy excuses ran through my head like a sickening montage, each one stabbing into me with fresh agony. I had been so blind, so utterly naive to think that she was just going through a phase, that the coldness between us was something we could fix if I just tried hard enough. But the truth was, she had checked out of our marriage long before I had ever realized it, and I had been too much of a fool to see it. Eventually, I pulled into a motel parking lot on the outskirts of town, my body too exhausted to keep going. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, staring at the neon sign flickering above the building, the weight of reality pressing down on me like a crushing force. I was alone now, truly alone. The life I had built, the future I had envisioned, all of it was gone in the blink of an eye, and there was no undoing it. I forced myself to move, to step out of the car and drag my feet toward the front desk, my body feeling heavier than it ever had before. The clerk barely looked at me as I handed over my credit card, giving me a room key with the same indifferent expression that Emily had worn when she told me she didn't regret any of it. Inside the room, I collapsed onto the bed, staring at the ceiling as the weight of everything settled over me. My mind refused to shut off, replaying the moment over and over again. The moment she admitted it, the moment I realized there was nothing left to fight for. I had imagined this scenario 1,000 times before in the darkest corners of my mind, but I had always thought if it ever happened, I would get some kind of dramatic closure, some kind of emotional reckoning where she would at least have the decency to look sorry. But instead, I had gotten nothing. Just a shrug. Just an indifferent confirmation that I had been replaced, that our marriage had meant so little to her that she couldn't even pretend to fight for it. And that was what haunted me the most. I don't know how long I lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of my own failure pressing down on me like an unbearable weight. At some point, exhaustion won, and I drifted into a restless, dreamless sleep, but even in sleep, the pain didn't leave me. It was there, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for me the moment I woke up to the harsh reality that my marriage was over. And as I opened my eyes to the cold, unfamiliar motel room, I realized that no matter how far I drove, no matter how many miles I put between myself and that house, I could never outrun the betrayal. Because it wasn't just about what Emily had done. It was about the fact that I had loved her, truly loved her, and she had never felt the same. And now, I had to figure out how to rebuild a life I no longer recognized. Waking up in that motel room felt surreal, like stepping into someone else's life, a version of me that had never existed before. I had woken up next to Emily for so many years, wrapped in the comfort of routine, believing that no matter how hard things got, she would always be there. But now, all I had was a stiff mattress, the hum of an old air conditioner, and a hollow space in my chest where certainty used to live. The weight of reality settled over me again, heavier than before, because now there was no escaping it. The anger had burned out overnight, leaving behind only exhaustion and an overwhelming sense of loss. I wasn't just losing a wife. I was losing the future I had planned, the life I had envisioned, the version of myself that had existed when I still believed in us. I had spent years thinking we were building something permanent, something unshakable, only to realize I had been the only one holding it up. I forced myself to get up, splashing cold water on my face, trying to shake off the fog that had settled in my mind. My reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger, tired eyes, jaw clenched tight, the kind of expression that belonged to a man who had been through hell and wasn't sure what came next. I grabbed my phone, staring at the notifications piling up. A few missed calls from my brother, a couple of texts from friends asking if I was okay, and one unread message from Emily. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at her name on the screen, my thumb hovering over it. I knew whatever she had to say wouldn't change anything, that it would either be another excuse or a half-hearted attempt to justify what she had done, but I opened it anyway. It was short, a simple, "We should talk." No apology, no remorse, just a request to talk, as if there was anything left to say. I tossed my phone onto the bed, shaking my head, because what could she possibly say now? That she was sorry? That she regretted it? I knew she didn't. She had made that clear when she admitted to everything with barely a flicker of guilt. And even if she did apologize, it wouldn't matter. Some betrayals cut too deep to be stitched back together, and what she had done wasn't just a moment of weakness, it was a choice. A choice she had made over and over again. Every time she came home late, every time she lied to my face, every time she let me believe we were okay when she knew damn well we weren't. I packed up my bag, knowing I couldn't stay in that motel room forever. The thought of going back to the house felt unbearable. The idea of being surrounded by memories of a life that no longer existed too much to handle. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I needed space, needed to be somewhere that didn't remind me of her. I drove without thinking, ending up at my brother's place an hour later, where he took one look at me and just nodded, no questions asked. He had always been the type to let me process things on my own, knowing I wasn't the kind of guy who spilled his emotions easily. I sat on his couch for what felt like hours, staring at the wall, while he just let me be. And for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. The days that followed were a blur of paperwork, meetings with a lawyer, and trying to untangle the mess that was our shared life. I hadn't spoken to Emily since that last message, and I didn't plan to. There was nothing left to salvage, nothing worth trying to fix. I wasn't interested in hearing her excuses and sitting through another round of gaslighting where she tried to twist things around and make me feel like I was the problem. I had wasted enough time on a woman who had never valued me the way I had valued her. And the more distance I put between us, the clearer everything became. I wasn't just grieving the end of our marriage. I was grieving the illusion of who I thought she was. Friends started reaching out, some of them hesitant, unsure of what to say. A few admitted they had seen red flags over the years, small things that they hadn't wanted to bring up at the time because they figured it wasn't their place. That stung more than I expected, knowing that maybe, just maybe, I had been the only one who didn't see this coming. But I didn't blame them. I had been so wrapped up in believing in us, so determined to hold on, that I probably wouldn't have listened even if someone had tried to warn me. It was a hard truth to swallow, realizing how blind I had been, how willing I was to ignore the signs because I wanted to believe in the person I thought I married. The hardest part wasn't the anger or even the sadness, it was the silence. The moments where I would reach for my phone out of habit, about to text her something stupid, before remembering that she wasn't my person anymore. The times when I would wake up in the middle of the night, rolling over to her side of the bed, only to find it empty. The quiet was deafening, a constant reminder of everything that had been ripped away, and yet, slowly, I started to find comfort in it. The absence of her lies, of her half-truths, of the weight of trying to fix something that had been broken long before I realized it. It was freeing in a way I hadn't expected. I wasn't okay, not yet. There were still moments where the grief hit like a freight train, where I had to sit with the reality of what had happened and let myself feel every ugly emotion that came with it. But I was getting there. I was starting to see that maybe this wasn't just the end of something. It was the beginning of something else. A life without her. A life where I wasn't constantly questioning, constantly doubting, constantly wondering if the person lying next to me was telling me the truth. A life where I didn't have to fight to be loved the way I deserved. One evening, as I sat outside watching the sun dip below the horizon, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't forgive her, and I never would, but the rage that had once consumed me had burned out. She had made her choices, and now I was making mine. And as I sat there, breathing in the cool night air, I knew that one day, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday, I would be okay again. I would love again. And next time, I would make damn sure it was with someone who actually deserved it. Time passed in a way that felt both painfully slow and unnervingly fast. In the beginning, every day felt like wading through thick fog, each moment heavy with the weight of betrayal and loss. The mornings were the worst, waking up in an unfamiliar place, adjusting to the absence of her, realizing all over again that my life had been derailed in a way I never saw coming. It was a constant cycle of remembering and forcing myself to forget, of pushing through the ache in my chest and convincing myself that one day it wouldn't hurt as much. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, things started to change. The sharp, gut-wrenching pain dulled into something more manageable, like an old injury that still ached when it rained, but no longer defined my every waking moment. I threw myself into work, using it as a distraction, as a way to fill the empty hours that once belonged to Emily. I picked up new projects, worked late, anything to keep my mind busy. But the thing about heartbreak is that it doesn't just disappear because you will it to. It lingers in the quiet moments, in the empty spaces, in the way certain songs or places or even smells can trigger an entire flood of memories. There were times when I still caught myself thinking about her, wondering if she ever felt even a fraction of the pain she had inflicted on me. But then I would remind myself that it didn't matter. Whether she regretted it or not was irrelevant. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. I wasn't interested in dwelling on the what-ifs anymore. One day, I finally went back to the house. I had been avoiding it, not ready to face the ghost of our marriage that still lingered in every corner, but I knew I had to. I needed to pack up the rest of my things, finalize the division of assets, and close that chapter for good. Walking inside felt like stepping into a memory, a life that no longer belonged to me. The air smelled the same, the furniture was untouched, but the house itself felt hollow, like it had been drained of any warmth or meaning. It wasn't my home anymore, just a structure filled with things I no longer wanted. As I moved through the rooms, packing boxes with the few belongings I cared to take with me, I realized how little of the life we had built actually felt worth keeping. The wedding photos went into the trash without a second thought. The gifts we had bought each other over the years, the little inside jokes that had once felt like treasures, now felt like relics of a lie. The process was strangely cathartic, as if with each item I discarded, I was shedding another layer of pain, another reminder of the man I had been before all of this. The divorce itself was quick, almost anticlimactic. There were no dramatic fights, no desperate attempts at reconciliation. Emily didn't beg me to stay, didn't try to justify her actions any further. She signed the papers with the same indifference she had shown the night she admitted to everything, and if that hurt at all, I refused to acknowledge it. I had already wasted too much time trying to understand her, trying to figure out why she had done what she did. The truth was, I would never really know. Maybe she had grown bored. Maybe she had fallen out of love. Or maybe she had never loved me the way I had loved her. In the end, the reason didn't matter. All that mattered was that I was free. For the first time in years, I started focusing on myself, on the things I had neglected, the hobbies I had abandoned, the friendships I had let fade in the name of making a doomed marriage work. I reconnected with old friends, spent weekends hiking, picked up reading again. It felt strange at first, like I was learning how to be alone for the first time in my life. But as the weeks turned into months, I realized that I wasn't just surviving, I was starting to live again. The world that had once felt so small, so suffocating, was opening up in ways I hadn't expected. I was no longer defined by my relationship, no longer tethered to a woman who had seen me as disposable. And that realization was more freeing than anything else. One evening, as I sat on my balcony, watching the sun set over the city, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace. It wasn't the absence of pain, because pain doesn't just vanish overnight. It was the acceptance of it, the understanding that sometimes people leave, and sometimes that's the best thing that can happen to you. I had spent so long mourning the loss of my marriage, but in reality, I hadn't lost anything worth keeping. What I had gained, clarity, self-respect, the ability to build a life that was truly mine, was worth so much more. I didn't know what the future held, and for the first time in a long time, that didn't scare me. I knew I would love again when the time was right. I knew I would meet someone who valued me the way I deserved, someone who wouldn't see me as an option but as a choice. But for now, I was okay with being alone. Because for the first time in years, I finally felt like myself again. And that was enough.